Welcome to the IR4 podcast, folks from around the world. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a special guest with us today. We're discussing the past, present, and future with a historian and a option trading specialist, as well as a published author and just an overall fantastic guy. It's going to be a great episode. You're going to love it. So, welcome with us, Michael and Brian, of course, Masterson.
Obviously.
We're here.
Obviously, we're here again.
He's right there. And we're going to be chatting some cool stuff. So, Michael, give us a background on just who you are and how amazing you are. People want to know.
Well, that's going to take a while. My name is Michael Thomsett. I've written a bunch of books, about 12 options books, and a bunch of other candlestick and technical analysis books, and just a variety of investment-related things. Mm-hmm. And I do this full-time, and I also do some online training and public speaking, and I do a lot of blogging, too.
Yeah.
So
you've done a few events.
Yeah.
You were telling me the other day how you type really fast.
Yes, I'm a self-taught typist, 2 fingers, 105 a minute.
Wow. Do you really? What? Wait, you still do two fingers?
Yeah.
Oh,
once you do that, you can't go back.
Wow.
Now I'm sure your thumbs work fast now too. With
well, it also
texting.
wears down your fingers because you use those 2 fingers all the time. Hope that comes out right.
105. Jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty fast.
Man.
But that's all I do. I mean, I'm just writing books.
Yeah.
And you've written a few history books as well.
I've written some history books. I've written 4, and 3 of them have been published, and the 4th one I have out being marketed right now.
Yeah.
Where's that book? Let's plug it right now.
Oh, it's right over here.
So let's just get right into the plugs.
Sure.
I like it.
Yeah, of course. The Mathematics of Options: Quantitative Derivative Price, Payoff Probability, and Risk.
Well, this is not your new one. This is the one you brought to me as a gift.
But this is for
I have
sale.
not read this one
This is
yet.
the latest one that's out.
Oh, latest one that's out.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what caught my eye was the Mathematics of, and you obviously just said Michael's a historian. Where does your passion lie? Does it lie within mathematics, financial markets, history, or
It lies with options and math.
Okay.
I love that stuff. Separately, a different part of my brain, I guess. I also do like history. I like researching it and writing about it, especially subjects that are not well known or misunderstood or miscast by one side or the other.
Interesting. Can you give us an example?
Well, the book I just finished is a book that's about the history of race relations in politics in the United States, all the way from slavery through civil rights. And the point I'm making in this book is that currently today, if you listen to what people say, the Democratic Party is the party of the oppressed and the underdog. But back when, they were also the party supporting slavery, the party that wanted to make peace with the South in the Civil War and let them secede, the party that was opposed to civil rights, and if it wasn't for the Republican Party and a coalition of Northern Democrats, the civil rights legislation never would have passed. And so, aside from the fact that you make these statements and you get labeled as a certain kind of politician,
Sure.
This is just true. And so I want the truth to be published out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
huge.
Truth is power.
I mean, there was a massive
Yes.
shift between, like you're saying, I mean, that's just history 101, is the Republican and Democratic Party are literally almost polar opposites of what they were.
They have switched over. And today, I mean, Lincoln might as well have been a Democrat if he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, and the historical element in your work, combined with the financial analysis of your work, where do the two bridge, or do you even bridge the two? So you look at like
they do bridge, because one thing I've learned from writing history books is that it gives me the discipline to do very thorough research and to try and do objective research, because like everybody, I have biases. So when I'm writing about options, I happen to be a believer not in Black-Scholes and implied volatility, but in historical volatility and charting and technical analysis. So that's a bias. But the danger I've seen, not only in myself but in everybody that's doing research, is that you look for citations and authorities that agree with your position.
right.
What I've found very interesting, and it began in the history section, but moved over to the options section, is I can get into a dialogue with myself in my chapter where I'll make a point that implied volatility bad, historical volatility good. Then I'll find a quote that says the exact opposite, and I'll say, now here's one point of view
Yeah.
that says the exact opposite,
Yeah.
and this is the rationale for that, and then here's the other point of view, so I can have this back and forth, which puts me just as the outside observer, even though I've stated my bias.
You're the information provider, and
Yes.
you're allowing your readers
And the educator, if you will.
right, an educator, and you're allowing your readers to formulate their own opinion.
Right. And as an educator, my most important function is to learn. And so by taking both sides like that and comparing them, I'm not saying you must believe with me that this is the way it is. I'm saying
Right.
here are the 2 points of view. And
You decide.
yeah,
And I gotta make a side note on that, because when you talked about, as an educator, your point is to learn. That's a great quote, by the way. But
Thank you.
Secondly, you're one of the few people that I've talked to that when I bring up cryptocurrencies, you didn't just automatically bash them. You were interested in them. You want to learn more about them. That's what me and you had lunch 2 weeks ago.
and I've researched them a little bit, and
Sure.
I have opinions about it, and I have biases. But I think a mistake people make is they latch on to a point
belief,
of view,
yeah.
a belief, and then they want that to happen so that they can be right. And so cryptocurrency, let's say I'm against cryptocurrencies and it goes way down, aha, it's crashing, it's the next tulip mania.
Yeah.
And the other hand, the people that support it are going to be likely to be very angry and lash out at people that don't agree with them. And this only makes the debate very difficult to follow, because it doesn't get down to the point about what's this really,
Sure.
what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think to even piggyback off that, the human psyche teaches us we operate better within group, and we always are searching for for valid to be valid amongst communities. So
Yep.
if you can latch yourself, it's very hard to be in the minority side advocating for something that you believe in so much, and then it goes great. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I told you so," which isn't the right way of going about it. If you're the minority, back to the education, teach the people who don't fully understand.
Teach it so you can have a dialogue about it, because
Exactly.
validity and confirmation bias are the opposites.
Exactly.
And so if all you
Yep.
look for is people who agree with your point of view, then you close your mind. But if you listen to what other people have to say, you might change your mind. I've changed my mind probably twice today.
It's very unfortunate in where we're at now, from a whole geopolitical into economic landscape. A lot of people have so much access to information, so they can really find whatever they want
Yep.
That's a problem.
to
Yeah.
cater to their confirmation bias.
That is a problem. And in fact, in that respect, the internet has, in a way, destroyed information gathering, because it's very difficult to objectively find information. Like, I want to find out about cryptocurrencies. Well, I can find out good stuff, bad stuff. I can find out a lot of different things about it, but I don't know what's really true. The one
Right.
thing I saw, by the way, just recently that really struck a chord, and I've been thinking about this, somebody put something online, and believe me, if I save a link to something, it's got to be pretty good. So I saved the link to this blog entry, and this individual said that whether cryptocurrencies succeed or fail isn't the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking is, where's the technology going? And to me, that made me think, well, this is the same thing as, was the telephone a good thing or a bad thing? When it was first invented, people said, I don't want somebody putting a box on my house that anybody who wants to can ring anytime and make me answer. That's crazy. Who wants that?
Yep.
And so if you agree with that, then you'll never get a telephone.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with cryptocurrency. I think there's so much emphasis on, should I be speculating in options on Bitcoin? Should I do calls or puts? Should I be bullish or bearish? That's not the question. Apparently the question, and I don't really understand how this works, but the question should be, where is the technology going? In the same way the internet, I mean, when the internet first came up, it was a military application,
Yeah.
not invented by Al Gore.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was damn. But it was
Forgetting.
something. It was something that had a very specific and very narrow application. And when
Yeah.
it was first suggested that we can make this available to everybody, well, we don't want to do that, because what are people going to do with it? I mean, I know when the first time I got on internet, I got my AOL account, and
That's right.
I got on there and I started looking around, and the first thing I thought was, what am I supposed to do with this? What is this for? And so I thought, oh, I wonder if I can look up that article that Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote in 1963. So I typed in Daniel Patrick Moynihan with my two fingers. And a thing came up that said, if you want to talk to people like Daniel Patrick Moynihan, click here. I thought, oh, this is great. So and of course, you know what it was. It was a dating site or something.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I see what this thing is.
Oh, I now know what the internet is for.
You know, it is.
Dad's looking for girls.
That's right. That's right.
You're absolutely right. You know, and the reason why it was pushed to the public was because of the data gathering. So the government wanted to understand more about what was going on in the populace. Well, in order to know what's going on in the populace, you have to give it was a catch-22. They have to give them this technology so they can gather the data or not, and they're keeping it at home. And that's really how the dark web and the deep web was developed. It started in the more deep web area into growing into a public internet.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you another thing about the internet that's really great, because I think there are a lot of bad things about it, but a lot of good things about it. One of the first history book I wrote was a history of the German resistance in World War II. A lot of the source documents I wanted to use had never been translated to English.
Oh, really?
So I had to learn German in order to read these books.
Awesome.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Whoa!
So I learned German, and the way I learned German was sitting down with these books, with an English-German, German-English dictionary, and looking up every word. And more and more, I said, I have to do it less and less. Next thing you know, suddenly I'm reading and thinking in German. I'm thinking, Ach du lieber, I'm speaking German.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was easy because I was going through learning it by reading this book and getting quotes out of it and translating it for myself. And if you think about how that's changed, this is before the internet. This was back in the early 90s, when the internet didn't really hit till late 90s, I guess.
Right.
What would you do today? Today, you would type in the German on Google Translate, or you take the whole PDF of the whole thing, translate the whole file all at once. It would be easy, and I wouldn't have had to learn German.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Pros and cons.
Yeah. Exactly, that's all it is.
So, Michael, given the research in past historical events, what are some key events that have really started to shape where we have moved from the 70s? Because that's really when you got started in authoring and doing the research, especially in the options market. But what are some critical events that have happened between now and let's say let's go up until the .com bubble? What are some significant events that have really shaped the financial landscape as to?
Well, obviously, the big shaping influence has been the internet, but along with that, the ability to expand laterally the numbers of products, because I think back to when I first started investing in the mid-70s, and the market was like, the Dow was 300 and something, and average daily volume was 1/20th of what it is today. And I realized there's a reason for that, which is that you couldn't have orders go in beyond a certain level because you had to handwrite confirmations, run them down to the pit, execute it, run it back, and this all takes time. So there was a limitation of how many orders could be processed. So the internet has made it possible for the options industry, for example, to go from calls on 16 stocks, that's all it was, to now let's try puts, let's do more of them, let's do it on more stocks, and what about doing it on indexes and on currencies and futures and anything else you can imagine. I mean, you could do options on practically anything these days. That's been a big event. But on the negative side, what's come along with this, in other words, you get the good, but you make a deal with the devil at the same time, is I think that the internet society, by and large, is a very angry and unhappy personality, if you want to assign one personality.
And I agree with you, and it's because it's easier for people to sit behind a screen and not have that human interaction where they can say and do whatever they want without any repercussions.
Whether you call it bullying or venting or whatever you call it, I have this experience all the time. If I'm on a live trading room, for example, where somebody has an angry message to give me, like I'll say, well, I don't like implied volatility, and I never use Black-Scholes, and then someone will pipe up and say, well, how can you call yourself an options expert if you string of expletives? You can't even. Everyone knows, and the minute someone says everyone knows, you know that it's not true. Everyone knows that Black-Scholes is, and so we get into that. Next thing you know, you're in a fight, a verbal fight. And when I say that people are unhappy, it reminds me, and again, going back to my historical background, it reminds me of the way things were right before the Civil War in 1858 to 1860, there was this huge fight between slave and free states, and between the morality or immorality of that institution versus the political and legal aspects of it. And the Dred Scott decision, where the Supreme Court said that slaves can't have any rights because they're not human. I mean, they're property. To me, that was like, how unhappy can a bunch of people get when you make a decision like that at the high court? And so I think that the Civil War was the culmination of great unhappiness, and it was a suicidal war. It was our most expensive war ever, and the cruelty, and the war is always like this anyway, but the Civil War was exceptionally cruel, and on both sides. And I think that we have a parallel today in that what was happening back then was that people were becoming more and more aware there were more newspapers available than ever before in the 1850s. So, and everybody was reading, and everybody was reading editorials and had opinions, and newspapers were either conservative or liberal, as we would call it today. And so that was the internet of the day. That was the information funnel. And people got unhappy at a certain level, the same way we've gotten unhappy with the internet, because there's so much conflicting information out there. And if you read some of the editorials back from the 1850s and 1860s, my God, I mean, using the N-word in an editorial in a major newspaper,
it's terrible,
and saying horrible things about the other side. And essentially, it was the same thing we have today. I could sit in a newsroom in 1858 and type with my two fingers anything I want and put it in an editorial, and nobody ever had to see me. I didn't have to see them. Today, we can do the same thing online with the internet.
There's just more people doing
it. And it can be autonomous. You don't even have to divulge who you are.
That's right.
So is this concern you?
Very much. But I think it concerns me in the sense that we went through this horrible Civil War, 1861 to 64, and we came out of it, went through another 150 years of struggle, not over yet, but it's better. And so I think that the internet and the ease of information is going to settle down on some level, and it's going to improve. I mean, it's not hopeless. It's just that we're going through this period right now that I think is very dark. But there's a lot of good stuff out there.
So, little piece of information for you. The internet allowed for the transfer of information. The underlying technology of cryptocurrencies is called blockchain technology. The blockchain technology allows for the transfer of value. And those transactions, and it can be, right now, it's obviously disruptive in the financial sector, but it's moving into healthcare, media, and all this other things. But what it does is it doesn't allow for a centralized authority to determine whether something's valid or not. It's actually a peer-to-peer system. And
so the value floats on its own.
It floats on its own, but it's also distributed across an open ledger, if you will, so that whatever's said, from its origin, it has to be true, and it can never be corrupted moving forward. So it is bringing, and I don't know, I think we're quite a far time away from us seeing the information funnel. So we expanded, right? And so we have all this information now, but now we're going to start to contract, I think, more into the truth.
That makes sense. And this is happening with cryptocurrencies too, because right now, what's dominating the news and information about cryptocurrencies is speculation.
Correct.
But speculation serves a purpose, as it does in the market. It facilitates the pricing of assets, and I'm sure cryptocurrencies are going to end up facilitating the pricing of value, as you put it, and that can only be a good thing.
Yep. Absolutely, and that's why, and again, I'm heavily involved in it. There are so many cryptocurrencies out there that are just...
Even Kodak has it, for heaven's sake. That's what scares me, is if Kodak has it, can it be any good?
It's ridiculous. There's nothing behind them, and again, but that's all going to come back to...
It'll shrink. So the question, though, isn't cryptocurrency, I mean, I think people think, because they see these images of a coin with lines through it, that there's a tangible asset somewhere, but it's really lines of code.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. It's all on the computer. It's all on the internet, I should say. But yeah, there's no physical actual asset. And I would love to hear your opinion of the gold standard when we moved off it into a non-gold back.
I think it was a huge mistake, because the money's not worth anything if you're not backed it by gold. And I was telling my buddy here about a book idea I had about, I shouldn't say this in public maybe, but the idea is that someone decides they want to get into Fort Knox.
This is a great idea. Tell them. This is fantastic.
They want to see if the gold's there, and they do get into Fort Knox, which would be the
like Ocean's 13, like Ocean's 14, kind of like the break into Fort Knox.
Ocean AU something.
Yeah.
And they get in there. There's no gold in there. It's all in Moscow or Tehran.
Yeah.
Right? Who knows where it is? But and the pieces of paper that the Federal Reserve, which is a private institution, isn't worth.
The IOUs.
And that's again, I've said this a million times on this podcast, so I apologize for being repetitive, but that's the beauty of cryptocurrencies. It's deflationary. There's a finite amount. It gets harder to mine and solve those algorithms. Just like it's if you took the gold methodology and put it onto the internet, it's exactly what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin
so how do I or anyone else create a Bitcoin? I mean, I have to have some value to create, and so does it happen because I want to sell something? I want to sell you my book. And so you pay me in Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, why is the U.S. dollar worth $1 to you? It's because there's trust behind it, and money is also a medium of exchange and a store of value. I think the store of value in fiat currency is slowly declining, and we've already seen with the internet the exchange the transfer of exchange. Happens with credit cards, and it happens through that system.
The money is becoming obsolete. But I think one thing that hurts that whole technology is, last month I was telling Jeremy about this too. I saw this story that there was some big convention, Bitcoin convention, and they wouldn't take payment in Bitcoin to go to the convention.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conventions.
I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? Ironic.
Yeah, it is ironic. And there's land grabs out there in this space right now to have a convention or to come to the, and there's everyone who tries to connect with me on LinkedIn now is a expert in this and expert in that, and I'm like, I've known this longer than you have. You're not an expert.
So the carpetbaggers are coming out.
Yes, very much so.
And that's going to happen with anything that's brand new on the scene, that's exciting, that you have the ability to make a lot of money. You're going to have just this crazy rush, like the gold rush, the physical gold rush.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happens when you're a public speaker or when you have a blog. You get people that say, I can show you how to increase your audience 20-fold, and it's easy, and you come on my show and do a thing and half hour, and you'll get all this business out of it. Then you find out they want $4,000 for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can tell you that our fee's only $2,000. Yeah, we're going to get you so many followers.
I'm going to give you cryptocurrency for it.
Hey,
good. I love it.
I'm going to write up my own code and give it to you.
I love it. Well, what's interesting, this is actually kind of how our conversation at one point dovetailed from all the information on the internet that is, going back and forth, both sides, people arguing. It's like, what if we removed money? And what I want to talk about for the future, like the next few minutes, is what would a world look like if money did not exist?
A world without money.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
I don't think there can be a world without money. It's what does money evolve into, or what is
But as a medium, not an end result or an end goal.
Correct. Yeah. And I think what we're moving into, and you can see it there's a kind of like a Reddit. It's called Steam, and it's one of the top 2 blockchain solutions that have been provided into the populace right now. And Steam, you can write articles, you can comment on articles, and based on what the whole community views your article being worth, or your comment being worth, or the information you're providing, they can click a thumbs up or an arrow button, and you can actually get paid.
You get more steam.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to transform into what you are contributing into the world. And I think that eventually, you can even use some of your personal information for collateral. It's going to be a very interesting.
Well, selling information and intellectual things would be a way to replace the idea of setting up a booth and selling bananas down on the corner.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And so that puts the onus onto the person. How are you really contributing? Are you just going to go out there and are you familiar with FUD is? Spreading FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Being a guy who goes in there and is trolling people and saying, if you're providing inaccurate information, if you're just being, for a lack of better terms, an asshole inside a community, people are going to see that.
Well, and kind of the far extreme opposite of that is a story I just saw this morning in Stockton, California, one of the most depressed places in the world. They have come up with a plan to solve the poverty problem. are going to make sure that anybody who doesn't have a job gets $500 a month. So why would you ever get a job?
Mm-hmm.
You can sit around all day, and
Sure.
500 is enough for some weed and some cigarettes and some wine. So why do you need a job?
Hell yeah, I'm moving.
Yeah, let's go. Let's just not
Move
work.
to Sacramento, to Stockton and go poor.
Yeah.
See,
It's a crazy idea because you're disincentivizing people from succeeding,
exactly.
which means you're disincentivizing them from being successful and happy. You're keeping them unhappy.
So we have a lot of guests on here who I do not consider sheeple, which I don't consider you a sheeple whatsoever. But a lot
That's
of people,
all I've ever wanted.
You always good.
a lot of people just
Shepherd.
they're content with where they're at. The 9-to-5 grind, coming home, drinking the same beer, watching the same show, doing the same routine. They
Well,
get stuck into
Thinking
that.
outside the box is kind of scary.
It is,
Yeah.
and there's risks involved.
And this gets back to the whole idea about contrarian investing versus going along with the crowd. And people think contrarians are just people that do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. That's not it.
It's not it
They're
at all.
people who think for themselves and who use logic instead of emotion. Very difficult to do when a couple of weeks ago the market falls 1,700 points. And a contrarian is going to say, this is a time to buy. The crowd is saying, oh, it's going to hell and we're all going to lose all our money. We better get out now. So the old buy low, sell high doesn't work. It's buy high, sell low. That's what most people do. And so it's the same idea about life in general. As a contrarian, are you going to be content for the 9-to-5 and the retirement plan and secure a job, or are you going to go out and think for yourself?
So I got a question because did you read Ken Fisher's book? Is that what you got? That Beat the Crowd? No. Okay. Well, you probably love that one. The reason I'm asking, here's a question for you, Michael. How would one become a contrarian? Because you always hear that, right? The contrarian wins. They sell at the top and they buy at the bottom. Because that's what I did eventually. Is somehow I went from not knowing anything to knowing what everyone else knows to becoming a contrarian. But in my mind, I don't know how I did.
I write about this a lot in my books, and the point I always try to make is this: I don't just say, well, don't go along with the crowd because they're always wrong, do the opposite. That's simplistic. What I try to tell people is, here are a lot of reasons why the majority are usually wrong, and why the market is dominated by fear and greed, and why this is a losing strategy to go along. You might as well put your money in a mutual fund and underperform the market every year consistently, which most of them do. But contrarian thought contains, and then I list a bunch of reasoning and elements about why you need to resist these temptations to go along. It's a very secure feeling to say, well, everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it too. And then you lose money. And so wouldn't you rather be a little bit afraid that, well, I'm the only one who seems to feel this way, but every time I do it, I make money. So where did I go wrong, or where did I go right?
Right. That's a theme. It's a theme. Extrapolating that outside into the general world. You look at these successful people, whether they're celebrities or athletes or who we deem successful from a society standpoint. Those people went against
They're always outsiders.
Yes,
Yeah.
always outsiders. And we probably don't have a lot of high school listeners or maybe even college listeners, but falling into that norm can be very you can go down a death spiral. I mean, even going to higher education.
Yeah.
The higher education system these days, you're going and you're in debt as soon as you get out of school,
Yeah.
and you're trying to climb out of this debt,
And you might not be able to get a job.
and you might not get a job, and you go to higher education to what? To learn a specific trade or to really specialize in a trade.
Or some people think to become smart.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you look at what society is paying college to be, and that's just, hey, go party and go have fun, and
Yeah.
this is your
Yeah.
youth, and no.
It's self-destructive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the
It is.
new Dave Chappelle show that came out, he was talking about. He said people say that you can be whatever you want all the time. Or you can be whatever you want to be. He goes, man, that's BS. He said you can be whatever you're really good at, if they're hiring.
If they're
I think that's Kevin Hart.
Or if you want to take a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started my first company at 23.
Sorry, Chris Rock, not Dave Chappelle.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Rock.
Started my first company at 23, and I had to take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And it was a
Yeah.
small amount of capital. I moved to Nashville, and it was sink or swim. But I encourage everyone out there listening to take those risks. I guarantee you're going to lose sometimes. But it's I probably sound like a broken record only because I listen to this all the time, but it's about how you bounce back, how you pull yourself back up, learn from your mistakes, what you did wrong, and then move forward, accomplishing on the missions and the goals that you want to do.
Sure. When I decided to get out of accounting and go into writing, I had a great job in San Francisco at a company called Utah International, and I announced that I'm going to leave and start a writing career. And everyone thought I was crazy. And my fellow accountants said things to me like, well, it's a really tough life. And I said, well, how do you know? Have you ever tried it?
Exactly.
And it wasn't that tough. I mean, I had already beat it in on my marketing plan, how I was going to do it, and I gave myself 5 years to do it, and it worked. And it worked beautifully.
Best decision you ever made?
Best decision I ever made.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Congrats on that.
That's
Because
great. Thank you.
that's hard and it's scary. Mostly because people, as you mentioned
If
earlier.
you're not scared, you're doing something wrong.
Exactly, yeah. It's the unknown, and no one likes the unknown.
Yeah.
But that's where everything lies, right? Like right on the edge of fear is where all of your dreams lie. I think it's
You only got one life. Why waste it?
YOLO.
That's
baby.
right. Great. Well, I only have one regret in my life, and that's what I call my clown school regret. In my first marriage, I lived in San Francisco area, and I heard about some auditions for the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Clown School. And I thought, what have I got to lose? So I went into the Cow Palace in San Francisco, went to the audition with hundreds of other people, and I had nothing prepared. But they said, you can't have any props or makeup or costumes. Just come out here and be funny for 5 minutes. And I did it. And I mean, I can't even remember everything I did, but they said, if you want to join the circus, and you know, every kid's dream, right? We'll come down to Clearwater, Florida, 6 months of training, and then you have to sign a contract to travel with the circus for 1 year. And I said, great. I go home and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to be a clown. And she said, no, you're not. You're an accountant and you're not going anywhere. And you know what? I listened to her and I shouldn't have. I'm still mad about myself because what I should have said was, well, I'll see you in 6 months or a year or whatever, and beep, beep. You know, I mean, it would have been the right thing to do, and that was my one regret. Of course, who knows where I'd be now if I'd
So this
out
is
of work,
I guess this is a question for both of you.
Okay.
How imperative is that intuition or that gut feeling, if you will, when trading or not only trading but making those
everything in life? It's everything. I mean, I think where you go wrong with this is if you fall into one of those traps, the confirmation bias, the wishful thinking, magic thinking, those traps. And I've seen lots of options traders and investors in general who believe that if I'm a good person and I wear my lucky shirt when I make a trade, it'll be profitable. Because that happened 3 times in a row. Mm-hmm. And the one time I wasn't making it, I lost a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. Therefore, my lucky shirt works. That kind of thinking can really destroy an otherwise good plan. So you have to have the science, and you have to have the ability to go through methodically and do your analysis, just stock picking, leave alone options. And if you don't do that, then you have no reason to think that you can invest or trade on your gut. Yeah. But once you get there and you have a good system and you've picked good stuff, you do have to depend on your gut about, I've set a goal of, I'm going to get out when I have this much profit or this much loss. And you have to have the discipline to follow that. But sometimes your instinct comes up and says, you know, I didn't make 50%, but I made 40%, I should get out now. Listen to that instinct, because invariably, if you don't get out and wait for that last 10%, you're going to lose the whole thing. So you have to let your intuition be a partner in your scientific mind as well.
Yeah, I'm going to dovetail on that too, because it does come down to that experience. So, for example, you've heard the term, you know, mother's intuition, right? Mm-hmm. Well, my mom always knew when I was doing something bad. If I went somewhere I shouldn't go, I mean, that was the vast majority of my life.
With the look on your face, that's what gave it away.
Yeah, but your mom knew, and your mom knew. Like, how do they always know? Like, moms always know when you're doing something wrong, but were they born with that, or is that something that, okay, you have a child for the first 2 years, like you start learning this kid's behaviors, and you
read their face.
You start getting that experience, and that's where the intuition, the hardest part is a lot of people will say, oh, go with your gut, go with your intuition, but if you have no training or skills, your intuition and your gut's going to be...
You're going to be in trouble, whether it's Bitcoin or stocks or options, real estate, anything like that. You've got to have the combination of a good sense of how things work and a good instinct about when not to be greedy. And at the same time, you have to have the foundation of the experience in order to do it and succeed at it.
You got to get that experience, whatever you're doing. So you have experience then. We're talking about experience with your gut. What do you see as being a potential viable or the next technology revolution or breakthrough? Because this is the IR4, the fourth industrial revolution.
Well, you've already touched on this idea of money being replaced by value and value exchange. I think that's going to be something that's going to happen. And I think that the more that happens and the more internationalized that gets, the less likely there's going to be a need for war, because war comes down to money and power. That's what causes all war. So, and if you could get rid of the motivation to dominate an area or a country, or to have a religious domination or political domination, there wouldn't be a need for that anymore. And a big part of that, I don't care whether you call it religion or politics, it comes down to money. And if you can get rid of the need to accumulate a big stash of money, or whether it's cryptocurrency or dollar bills, then that will really fix things. I mean, we've been dreaming for centuries about a world without war, and it has never happened.
Yeah, world
so
peace.
there'll probably always be war in some reason.
So I really do appreciate people older than myself, given more experience in life. But you've also seen a lot of things that I haven't seen, probably you haven't seen, but...
You're assuming I'm older than you?
Why are you making that assumption?
Maybe more mature, but
That's an analytical formulation I came with.
it's intuitive.
I'm just trusting my gut here.
He probably doesn't remember the pre-internet era.
That's right, that's right.
But, all right, so you've seen... the fourth industrial revolution is kind of what we believe, this paradigm shift that we're in now, hence why we started this podcast. But if you look...
What was the first three? Because I know of one, but go ahead.
So the agricultural revolution and mass production and whatnot, in that sense, and that kind of trickles over into the industrial revolution, which again enhances the mass production, but also the invention of the steam engine
And other inventions.
huge.
Cotton gin.
And then here's where I think a lot of people get lost. The internet / technology boom is the third revolution. You could argue that we're still in that, but what Jeremy and I, given long conversations off camera, have had is we've noticed that this pendulum is coming back, and what's happening is that the global consciousness is really advancing at an exponential rate. So these technological tools that have been given to humanity are really allowing for this new way of thinking, and just everything that we've talked about here, all of that being encompassed into where we're going next and what's happening next. And this actually leads into my question, but those are the three, and then we're in the fourth now. We don't know what the hell it is or where it's going.
That's just our opinion. By
Our
the way.
opinion, yeah.
We're just saying it's the fourth because it's a whole massive global consciousness change about what is money, what is currency.
Well, I sense the same thing,
Yeah.
and I think that those questions are being asked, and it kind of is, as with the other revolutions, they're outgrowths of one another. So an outgrowth of internet technology has produced phenomena like Elon Musk and Tesla. I pay attention to what he says and what he does, because I think he's the guy that's going to lead us into the future, and he's going to come up with stuff.
Sure.
The all-electric car is just the beginning of it.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody was interviewing him, and they said to him, "Well, isn't it true that your car company is just a vehicle for you to work on improving your battery?" And he goes, "Yeah."
Wow.
Because the battery, the car is literally the vehicle, if you will, for the technology, in the same way that the technology behind Bitcoin is the future, not Bitcoin itself or
Right.
any other.
Yeah.
It's the technology, and Musk is doing the same thing with batteries and solar power and all of this stuff. And I think that he comes up very much like Steve Jobs did, with ideas that are visionary, really visionary. Not just, I think I see what the future is going to be, but here's what I can make the future be.
Absolutely. And now, so do you agree or disagree with the comment of history repeats itself?
Well, I think it has, yeah. I don't think it's inevitable, but it seems to always do it.
Okay. So given your excellent background in studying historical events, are you seeing a repetition of a specific time that you've studied or that we're in right now? And if so...
Yeah, I do see parallels with the Civil War. And what did you have then? You had South versus North, agrarian versus industrial, poor versus wealthy, and of course slave versus free.
Sure.
It was all of the stuff that was very binary. And right now we have, whether you call it Democrat, Republican, have not, rich, poor, it's really the same thing. And that balance, once you get people entrenched into that, it's very hard to shift out of it. And so the question is, how do you end that? How do you bring these two sides together? I mean, you look at Congress split right down the middle for so many years.
Yep.
And that's an outgrowth of this problem. So I think that the Civil War was the solution to that problem, which was a very expensive way to solve the problem.
Not only expensive, but I mean,
Tragic.
tragic.
Yeah.
Do we
Ruined
need to go? Do you
ruined
think
whole
we need
families.
to? I mean, I would say that we are going through a tragic time now with given certain things that have happened in the past couple of years, especially race-driven. But are we at the pinnacle of that, and are we going to be coming out of it, or does something severely tragic need to happen in order for us to move on?
Here's the problem with pinnacles is that any speculator will tell you that, I'll know when to get out because we'll be at the top. And then the next week when things have crashed, they'll say, well, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And so you never know when you're at the pinnacle. It does feel, however, that we're getting to a tipping point of some kind where there's going to be some accounting for what's going on. And by the way, I think Donald Trump's a big part of this because he is not a politician, and I like a lot of the things he's done and a lot of things he stands for, but every time he opens his mouth I cringe because he has a way of being very unpolitical. And that's only part of it. The other part of it is that he has a way of being very aggressive. And I actually met him once when I was ghostwriting a book for his attorney.
Oh, really?
We were in Trump Tower, and I'm in this meeting and feeling really stressed because the atmosphere in there was horrible. And
tense, like tense?
Very tense. And every day I'd go back to my room and take a long nap. So I'm writing this book. I go home after doing all the interviews, and my phone rings one day, and it's Donald Trump. And he says, we're going to renegotiate our contract because we're paying you too much money. And I said, well, I don't have a contract with you. I have a contract with the publisher.
Yeah.
You have a contract with the publisher, but I don't have a contract with you. Oh. I'll get back to you. So then 5 minutes later, I get a call from my editor at John Wiley & Sons, and he says, did you get a call from Trump? I said, yeah, he wants to renegotiate a contract. And he said, well, that's not going to happen. I said, I know, but he's interrupted my writing. So
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Good for you.
That's who he is, though. He always is looking for an opportunity to fix what he sees as something that can, whether it's broken or not, he wants to fix it.
Yeah.
And
so it can be advantageous more towards his
and I think here's the interesting thing that we're going through right now. I think he can be very good for this country, even for people that hate his guts. I mean, a lot of people really hate this guy. And the people that like him can be right in some respects, but they can also be blind in some respects. So it's kind of a mixed bag of good and bad, but I think that he is a catalyst for this change
I agree.
about.
And I was
that's
gonna,
the pinnacle.
And I was,
Yes,
and
yes,
I
yes.
agree with you. And I think whether you like or dislike
Doesn't
Trump
matter.
doesn't matter. I'm batching it all into one. The whole 2 years ago, this whole political race. What Trump did expose the corruptive element in politics.
Absolutely.
And I think that was very important to do.
If you look back at the people that have influenced history, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Adolf Hitler,
Kennedy.
absolutely. Now maybe Donald Trump. I mean, these are people that came upon a time in history when something was at the pinnacle you mentioned, and they made these changes. Now in business, you've got Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and before that you had Edison and Howe and Morse and Rockefeller and Ford, and they all addressed a pinnacle either economically or politically or socially.
Right.
And I think Trump is one of those people.
Unfortunately, is he doing it one for the better politically, but maybe in the negatives from a social standpoint? Because
I don't think
everyone hates him, and I'm like, okay.
I don't think he's
okay.
Well, first of all, not everyone hates him, but I would say that he didn't do it intentionally. It's just happening.
But he's ego-driven in the same way that
He's
FDR
doing-
and Churchill and
Sure.
Stalin and Hitler, all ego-driven.
He's doing what he's wanted to do, and he wanted to do it, and that's his interest. And what's happening is he's carving a path. People are going, "Whoa, what's going on right here? This is not a good path. You should be carving it." I think you're right. It's a catalyst for changes
If
that
you
are going to happen.
think about it this way, I think that he is completely motivated egotistically. I think his ego is huge, and that's what drives him, is that this is all about him. But his ideas, in many respects, are things that we need to address now. And immigration, tax reform, whatever the politics are. I think he's doing some good things, even though his motive might be that he wants to carve out a position for himself in history. As did every other politician, by the way.
Yeah, I'll say that. They all want that.
He's subconsciously changing where we are and what we're doing to fulfill his needs.
That's right.
But, listen.
But that's every president. I mean, they all do that. They
what
want to be.
sane person would want to be president?
It's difficult.
Would you want a background check? I know I don't.
No, I wouldn't pass any background check. Not for president.
We all know that about you.
Yeah. I was not for president. Nothing. I would never be able to make that rule happen. But I think that what he's doing is he's carving the path for people that will become thought leaders, that will be able to become now presidents, right? That's what excites me the most when Trump got elected. And
just as Kennedy did in his era, in his generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's gonna bring in new thought leaders into politics, people who are thinking differently. They're going to be thinking about the people. They're going to be thinking about decentralization, open source. How can everyone benefit from this equally? And I think that regardless of how that impact has happened, once you were president, you're president forever. His name's already on the history books forever. So he's gotten that, and that's a huge deal.
Mike, I wear this with pride, but I would say I'm somewhat of a conspiracy theorist. Do you have any information as to the global banking system and how that came to existence and where that's going, or would you rather not speak on that topic?
I don't know enough about it to really. I mean, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories, but I tend to dismiss them because they're conspiracy theories. But some conspiracies are true, and I know that. I don't know anything about the global banking system.
Okay, all right, fair.
I'm in Basel Zero.
Okay, fair.
Yeah,
fair.
Definitely fair. So talking about Elon Musk, we were chatting too, and I just want to make sure this was on the podcast today because this was exciting to me. Was just like I think that power lines are going to be gone in a decade.
Oh, they're already disappearing.
Either underground or no need for them at all.
Sure.
Teslafied.
Wireless. That's what I'm saying. But Nikola Tesla came up with that idea a century ago of just wireless energy,
and it worked.
And not only did it work, but I think now with that technology, we can. So to answer my question I asked you earlier, that's what I think we're going to be going with. Not really clean energy, but open source wireless energy.
I love Tesla.
Yeah. You're the company or the guy?
The guy.
Okay.
Nikola
the original
Tesla.
Yeah. Smartest guy in the world.
One of the companies I'm working with is trying to bring blockchain solutions, which is the technology underlying cryptocurrencies, to Latin American countries. And there's this leapfrog approach that we've seen in impoverished nations or continents, for that matter, with the internet and cell phone. We may be seeing this soon in other areas of the world, but one of the things that is starting to happen, and its timeline for 2020, is launching cube satellites, which could be as big as this table. And you can create a constellation of small satellites over a certain area, and you're providing direct internet down below. So instead of cell towers...
To the village in Africa or whatever.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And
so you get rid of the towers and the wires.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
all solar powered.
Yep. Exactly.
Wow.
Would they be? They'd be solar power. I mean,
they would. And
it makes sense, and I think it's inevitable. And I think back to when I was a kid, there was a film that I remember this so well. It was What the Future Will Look Like in the Year 2000. And here was a picture of a city. You see the skyscrapers down there, and here are these lanes of one-person planes traveling in their lanes.
Yep.
Really?
And, with the little goggles on.
Yeah.
And of course there were hundreds of them and no accidents because we're all enlightened in the future.
Right.
And I remember thinking that, as a kid, I don't know if this will ever work because right now you see people in cars on the freeway acting like idiots and changing lanes. And so I'm in my plane going like this.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Oh, yeah, and that accident doesn't stay up there. It's going to come down.
Yeah, the flying car thing, I've actually never... Because we have that technology more or less now, but it's very, very expensive.
It's called a Piper Cub.
Yeah, it's very expensive, but the challenge is also going to be, flying vehicles air traffic control. I mean,
Yeah.
all the commercial, like you're in a whole different. We just had a drone specialist.
drone
come in,
specialist.
talking
Drones
about,
are insane.
Talking about
They are.
who owns
And I was
the
gonna
air.
say, look at the problem that's causing, and look at the potential
boy.
for terrorist use of drones.
You should go back through our site
send it
and
to you.
and he'll send it to you. But
Okay.
we had a drone podcast that was fascinating, and actually we're going to have a pilot come onto the show, and he's going to give us a little bit more about the aerospace from a commercial use and where that industry is going and how drones are disrupting but also enhancing, and
Yeah.
it's
It's a mixed blessing,
it is.
Yeah.
like
It is.
everything else. I mean, technology always does this. You know, the automobile put all those livery stables and blacksmiths out of business.
Yeah.
And there were no roads, so who's going to build the road? I mean, it was a very disruptive technology.
Mhm.
And the telephone, telegraph, now the internet, and now wireless technology. I mean, what are all those linemen going to do that are working for the electric company, right?
Well, I mean, that's the same thing with the agricultural revolution is or the industrial revolution is when agriculture, that was like 98% of the workforce back in, 150 years ago,
Yeah.
was 90% was in agriculture. So after that occurred, everyone's like, well, what's going to happen with all the farmers? What's going to happen with
But look what caused the Industrial Revolution, the Black Plague.
yeah. They had it.
80% of Europe wiped out. There was no one to work the fields, no one to bury the dead. I mean, there were cities and counties and whole regions of countries where everybody was dead.
Yeah.
And so suddenly labor became very much of a commodity. And industrializing, whether it was farming or textiles or whatever, became so necessary.
Yep.
That's the next book I want to write, by the way.
Necessities, right?
Yeah.
Necessities out of huge catastrophic events.
Exactly.
Look at the financial crisis and what was birthed a year later.
Hashtag Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Always.
You're saying from 2008 to 9?
Yeah, that's when it was initially created. Yeah.
I just finished editing a book about some of the players in that, and the thing that strikes me that you see repetitively is allegedly smart people who know all about derivatives doing these really stupid things and losing billions of dollars because they lost sight of what am I trying to do here? What is my job? What is the purpose of this? And next thing you know, they're either making just basic mistakes, which they should know better, or their ego gets in the way. It's almost always ego-driven. Very few people that led to that financial crisis were doing it to enrich themselves. They were doing it because their egos were so big and they thought, well, I know this looks high risk, but I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And they didn't.
It is not.
So
Lehman Brothers, good example.
oh my gosh. So one thing we like to kind of end the podcast with is a prediction. Now, I don't believe this prediction would be very narrowed. It would be more of an overall type of thinking. But what do you think is going to be happening? I'm trying to think of a way to word this question. But what do you think would be happening to humanity and global consciousness, if you will, in the next 10 years?
Well, first of all, I want to say that you hear a lot of predictions about coming famines, we don't have enough food, and those things always seem to be worked out by technology.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so my prediction is that it's all going to be just fine. Of course, every year there's something that nobody anticipated, that the latest black swan is going to happen, and people are going to die and people are going to be hurt by it. The biggest concern I have is that if a nuclear bomb is sent over here from Korea or anywhere else, the EMP is the biggest threat. It's going to be more devastating than the actual explosion of a bomb would be. It could be years that we would lose all of our technology. That's what I see and that would be my prediction, is that we have to either fix or contend with or suffer through this great vulnerability, which is our reliance for everything on the internet and the power grid. Because without the internet, how do you pay your bills? How do you gas your car? How do you buy food? How does food get into the stores? Walmart is 7 days away from empty shelves, and 80% of their stuff comes from China. So if ships can't navigate the seas and if ports can't unload the goods, where do we get food? Where do we get transportation? I mean, it would be, you've heard the expression, the next war will be fought with sticks and stones. That could actually happen, and that's my big concern. I hope that's not going to happen, but to prevent that, we're going to have to do something to change, either diversify the technology or do something to prevent this from happening, because it's crazy. If something like that does happen, I've heard, and I don't know the technology of this, but if that pulse did go off, that we could be without internet and electricity and running water for years.
Yeah.
I don't want to go out to a river and try to boil water so I can drink it. I mean, that's what you'd be looking at.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Got to figure that
Fascinating.
out.
So, where can our listeners get in touch with you? Do you have a website?
I do have a website, thomsettpublishing.com, and I've just started a new website, which is eventually going to be a subscription site called the Thomsett Investment Guild, or
Awesome.
Guide, Thomsett Investment Guide. Can't even say it right. And I'm doing that with a good friend of mine and a great webmaster named Michael Thomsett. He's in Land O'Lakes, Florida, and he's doing all the tech stuff, and I'm doing all the option stuff, and we're putting a whole bunch of stuff onto this site. It's going to be very interesting.
Awesome. And is your book for sale on your website? Or Amazon?
It will be, but not yet. No,
Okay.
all my books can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but
Yeah.
Amazon's the easiest place to get it.
Okay, great. And the new one, The Mathematics of Options. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very
It's been
much.
a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
It was great fun.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Folks from around the world, thanks so much for tuning in to the IR4 podcast where we discuss the fourth industrial revolution. We want to hear from you. What do you think is next? What do you think we should talk about next? What questions do you have for this beautiful guy to figure out? You guys are amazing. And until next time, love, live, learn. You guys rock. Bye.